That was a really fancy way to do it. All right. Welcome, everyone. I am so glad that y'all are here for the second installment of the Fight ALS Film Festival. Um, I'm sorry I'm late. We got brought by a hailstorm that knocked my power out just long enough to make me restart everything. So I was going to. I think let's kick it off with Rachel and Nick and let you guys introduce yourselves, um, how you're uh, connected to the film, and anything we should know about you.
Sure, I can go first. My name's Rachel King. My husband was Adi Barkin, the subject of the film, and I worked with Nick well, he made the film, but I was there too. So I'm one of the subjects of the movie.
Yeah, we couldn't have made it without you. That's for that's for sure. I'm Nick Bruckman. I'm the director of Not Going Quietly. Thank you, Sunny, for hosting us, and thank you all for doing this. I love that you guys are bringing film into the conversation. We made this film as something that we thought or hoped would be a tool to empower activists, organizers, organizations who are trying to make a better world, make a better healthcare system, and support ALS research. So it's really thrilling to see that carrying on even 2 years after the film came out.
Yeah, we're honored that you're both here. Um, let's start with what's happened since then? End of the movie, we know you have a little girl, and kind of just catch us up from there on the parts you feel comfortable talking about.
Sure, yeah. So our kids, Carl and Willow, who are in the film, are 4 and 7 now. So it's been a while. Willow is just a tiny baby at the end of the movie. Obviously, unfortunately, the biggest thing that has happened is that Adi passed away in November. He was having an issue with his breathing tube that we actually weren't totally aware of. We knew that there was a problem going on, but we didn't know how serious it was. And he wasn't getting enough oxygen, and that led to him going into cardiac arrest. That has been really devastating. We definitely thought that he would be able to be with us for quite a bit longer. We've been sort of recovering from that since November. Not that we are recovered. And trying to think about, of course, ways to keep the work that Adi was doing going forward, and trying to keep, the fight for healthcare justice, for Medicare for all, part of the political conversation, which was something that he was so passionate about and that he spent so much time working on. So yeah, and I'll let Nick talk about maybe what's been going on with the film since it was first released.
Yeah, the film came out in 2021, and it was really rewarding. I think one of the biggest bright spots was that we were able to celebrate the film with Adi. We began filming it in 2018, I believe, and so I'm really grateful and will always be that I got to spend those years with Adi, and then more so that he did have the chance to come to our big premiere in LA and have a standing ovation. And beyond that, we did take the film all over the country, many of which Adi was able to attend. We were able to show the film in DC in the Rules Committee hearing room with Congresswoman Jayapal and the Rules Committee Chair McGovern, and Nancy Pelosi came to talk about healthcare justice issues. So the fact that we were able to do that and literally bring Adi into back into the Capitol through this film was really important to us. And we were very happy that the film was released on PBS and was streaming on Hulu, where you all saw it, and received an Emmy nomination and a lot of other accolades. But as I said earlier, really the most important thing to me is that organizers and activists and the people carrying on Adi's torch can use the film. It was very poignant for me, and at Adi's memorial, we were able to use parts of the film as well to celebrate him. Some of the outtakes, even from our footage, became kind of part of that event. And I hope some of that footage, is something that Adi can be remembered by in the decades to come. I still believe that Adi belongs in the pantheon of great civil rights organizers of our time, and I feel very, very privileged that I was able to, along with Rachel and their family and the rest of our team, preserve a piece of that legacy and share it all with you.
You did a great job. Rachel, we learned at the beginning of the film that you guys were college sweethearts. Were you as politically charged?
Okay, what if you come over to the new house tonight after work? Well, Adi and I definitely, participated in some protests together as undergraduates, which is something that I've been thinking a lot about recently with the protests going on at Columbia, and just thinking about how engaged Adi would be with those protests that are going on right now. And also there's now it's spread to the UCSB campus as well. Just thinking about how much he would love to be involved in supporting the students right now. But at the time, I was planning to go into journalism, which is actually, we met on our college newspaper. And so I think that I was a little bit more in the sort of, objective reporter mode of things, whereas Adi was always, more involved in political work very early on. So I think, those were sort of our roles as we were starting out dating and doing more political work. But yeah, no, we definitely were both very involved in a variety of political issues very early on.
Nick, have you had much work in the political space? Where did you kind of fall in as far as, like, did you shoot most of the stuff? Are you on the producing side? Remind me what you're...
Yeah. So good questions. I always really considered myself an activist, and was very involved in college organizing, much like the kind Rachel was talking about. At my school, that was around the time of the war, and I was, sort of really believed, much like I was much more idealistic when I was younger about advocacy and activism issues, and I really thought we could stop the Iraq War. And I shifted kind of that passion into making documentary films. I think that film is a really powerful way to combat xenophobia, and one of the ways that I felt most able to contribute to the types of causes that Adi and the other films I've worked on have been a part of. But when I met Adi, I really hadn't been protesting much myself, really anything for the 5 or 10 years before that. I've been really focused on my business and my films. And when I saw him and the work that he had done in 2017, going to fight the tax cuts and protest the Trump administration and the impending cuts to healthcare in his condition, I really thought, like, man, why haven't I been doing this anymore? If this guy is going out to DC and getting arrested in his wheelchair, why do I think it's cool for me just to focus on my little bubble now and kind of give up that part of myself? So he brought that part of my younger life back. And that experience of meeting him and sort of losing that jadedness, that was one of the first feelings I had when I met him, was this kind of exhilaration of what it felt like to be organizing and in community and fighting something. And I had really lost that. And one of the, I think, like greatest gifts that he gave me was kind of bringing that back. Um, I had not been involved in healthcare, and I actually think to some degree, and maybe Rachel can speak more to this as well, I don't think Adi was particularly focused on healthcare as an issue. And I will say personally that I wasn't frankly that familiar with ALS in particular. I think I had most of the mainstream understanding of it from the Ice Bucket Challenge. I didn't know anybody personally with ALS. And so the going on that journey and then this becoming an issue of focus for me really only happened because of him. And I think he's had that effect on many others as well, to make them realize how important this is.
Rachel and Nick, what do you think, had he not gotten ALS, what issues do you think would have been at the forefront for him?
Well, his work, previously was really focused on economic justice and racial justice and kind of the intersection of those two. So he founded a campaign called Fed Up that was about pressuring the Federal Reserve to take into account more issues of racial justice, and to focus more on it gets wonky, but the Federal Reserve has a dual mandate based on unemployment and inflation, and so to focus more on the unemployment side of things, to make sure that unemployment is low versus always keeping inflation at a particular benchmark. So basically to prioritize workers and low income people over people who are have a lot of money and are worried about their savings accounts. And so I think that he probably, would have kept working on those kinds of issues. They kind of spoke to his expertise. He had an undergrad degree in economics and then a law degree. And so it was a really useful way for him to bring together like his passion as an activist with his kind of expertise in these fields. But then, I think what he was, and Nick can kind of talk about this too, but what he was so good at was finding really creative ways to make these, apparently wonky issues understandable and relevant to people. And so, he came up with this plan of bringing a lot of workers to the annual Federal Reserve retreat in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which is, where Janet Yellen goes to like meet with the other people in the Federal Reserve and these sort of like elite economists. And so his idea was sort of like, okay, let's bring all these people there, and then they have to deal with this issue of like, how do our policies affect everyday workers and real people? And so I think that's what he really transferred over when, his own personal story seemed to make so much sense to be working more on healthcare justice issues. That he was so good at coming up with these really creative ways to make people care about and pay attention to these issues and like understand how they affected their everyday lives, which is maybe a little bit easier with healthcare, but still was something that he was always really focused on.
One thing I'll add to what Rachel said is there's this clear through line in Adi's work between that time at the Fed Up campaign and protesting the Federal Reserve to what he did in the next phase of his life after ALS, which was using the power of regular people's stories told directly to power in order to create social change, in order to affect policy. He saw that the Federal Reserve bankers weren't listening to the voices of everyday regular people. And so he said, well, I'm going to bring them there. I'm going to fly them out to Jackson, Wyoming, which nobody had ever done before. Nobody had ever thought, oh, these, Janet Yellen and these folks should hear directly from low-income black and brown workers. It was kind of the exact same thing when he was diagnosed with ALS. I think there was this pivot where he realized that it was his own story that needed to be told directly to people in power. It was his own voice that now mattered because he had entered the disability community. He had gone from a place of relative privilege to becoming somebody who was marginalized, whose voice needed to be heard. And to some degree, he had all this experience doing that. which is why it came so natural to him, in my view, when he was on that plane with Senator Jeff Flake. It was so easy for him to confront him with this policy position because he had done that for a decade leading up to that. And it was so incredible and serendipitous that he was the person to do that because he happened to be at the intersection both of the kind of complex policy wonkery that Rachel talked about, but also somebody with this such incredibly moving, persuasive, powerful personal story that it both entranced Jeff Flake to talk to him for 2 minutes, as well as captured the attention of the whole country, that he became the face of this movement. And so for me as a filmmaker and the kind of meta narrative of the story, and I think why I love that you guys have a film festival about this, is that to me, Adi's story is, of course, much bigger than him. It carries on beyond him, and it's about the power of one small voice in the right room at the right time. And that's what I try to do through my films, and what we tried to amplify with Not Going Quietly was to take that little clip that Adi and Liz, his co-conspirator and partner in crime in the film, took on that plane and expand that into a much larger movement of all the other activists that he takes on the road to do the same thing, to confront their legislators, and then to translate that into a film that could carry that torch forward. So that was kind of the meta themes for me of what I wanted the film to be about, not just about Adi, but about that using this really terrible and tragic diagnosis that all of you are working on, and Sunny, that you're experiencing, that he was able to turn it into a source of power, not only for his own life, but for so many others.
For sure. And then this is our third year doing this, so we've got quite a few films in our vaults that we've discussed, and I think a central theme that comes up each week is wanting to create something that is bigger than us, wanting to have something that lives beyond my home family movies, and that grows and is still relevant 10 years from now. And I think you guys accomplished that. So thank you.
Thank you.
The question I wanted to ask is like, how do you deal throughout the movie and like watching the movie again with just like the frustration of like having this point you're trying to get across, and like you're talking to these senators, you're talking to all these people in power. Like, what is that feeling like? Like being there every day? Like, we've all been involved at some point in some type of like movement or trying to do like, push for something. But like when you're so in it, like, well, we're like, how do you deal with that every day? Like, I don't know how to ask the question better.
Yeah, it's really tough. I mean, I think that Adi said that after Trump was elected, he sort of, and it was right after he had, 6 weeks after he'd been diagnosed. It was kind of this crazy, back to back. And he just felt like his, both his personal and professional lives had kind of fallen apart, right? Like what do you do as an activist in that moment? And obviously he then found ways to kind of like tie them together, actually. But I think the past couple of years for the Medicare for All movement, for the care movement in general, have been really demoralizing, right? We were so close to getting $400 billion towards home care in the Build Back Better bill. And then, that fell apart, and that part of the bill got stripped out, and that money did not come through. And so, I think that, Adi really believed in the idea that, the arc of history is long, but it bends toward justice. But it can be really hard when you're in that long part where it's bending, right? And it's a slog. And I think that, that in a way, it's also what he was very good at, was sort of like continuing through those difficult moments and figuring out strategies to keep going forward. But definitely, it is very hard and it can be very demoralizing at times when it seems like, we're not getting to the place that we want to be, or even moments where we were very, very close and then it gets kind of taken away. So yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely in a hard moment around healthcare, around care more generally. And there's a lot of really great people who are trying to figure out how to keep these movements moving forward.
Tell them about Carl's meeting with the president. Because I want to hear about it.
So Carl and I were in DC a few weeks ago. There were a couple of events around the kind of care coalitions, so the groups that are working on home care, on funding for paid leave, for childcare, these different sorts of things that were, unfortunately taken out of the Build Back Better Act. So we were at a rally, and which the president spoke at, and Carl got to shake his hand, which I would say he was excited about, but honest, he was excited beforehand, and by the time we had been waiting for, a couple hours and it finally happened, he was kind of over it. But it was nice for him, to see the kind of work that Adi did. And I think, both kids do know a lot about his work. A big part of why Adi, Sunny, you were just talking about this sort of like living beyond us, but a big part of why Adi wanted to make the movie was for the kids to be able to see in the future. And they actually haven't seen it, although they're interested in it. But they do know a lot about his work. Going back to the student protests that are going on right now, I was telling the kids about them the other day. I was explaining it, and I said that, some students had gotten arrested for protesting. And Willow said, "Oh, just like Abba," because they know that he used to get arrested for protesting. So, I think that they are very interested in the work that he did, and in sort of seeing him as, like Nick was saying, as a civil rights leader. So it's really nice to have, obviously this document of the kind of work that he did.
What was his proudest moment, Rachel? Other than the birth of your two children.
Yeah, definitely the kid's birth. Um, that's a good question. I think he was really proud of I don't know that it was his proudest, but I think he was really proud of the speech that he gave at the 2020 DNC, which Nick also produced and did a wonderful job on. But that was, virtual, of course. And so it was a produced video rather than him speaking at the DNC. But I think he was really proud of that. And I think it was really impactful. I don't know, Nick, what do you think? You have any thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, definitely Willow and Carl is all he would ever say if you asked him that. If he were here, that's what he would say. But yeah, I think the most important thing to Adi was to make people laugh. I think that was his number one priority in pretty much every situation, whether it was a, screening like this or, I don't know, by way of example, like pretty much every time we would do a screening like this, somebody would say, um, Adi, why did you agree to let them into your life? And what he would say if you asked him that, he would never say it was for the kids. He would say, I looked deep into my heart and I thought, do I really want to put this pain on display? Do I really want to put my family and Rachel through that? And Rachel and I sat down and we talked about it. Do we want to let a film team capture our most intimate and painful moments? And I finally decided that the most important thing is to be rich and famous. And maybe this film will help me get there. And so I said yes. But of course, there's like an element of truth to that, which is that, I do think he felt like the film could advance his cause. And I think that's kind of part of the thing. It was good for his family, but also I think to have, but also, I do think he wanted a bigger platform and he saw this opportunity of this terrible thing to provide meaning to him. And, I yeah, miss him a lot. It's really what it comes down to, yeah.
Well, I think the movie was absolutely amazing. And I guess my question is, Rachel, as a wife, how hard was it to see Audie really pushing himself physically, knowing that he's going through these challenges, but yet, doing it for such an amazing cause? But then seeing, his struggle along the way. And I'm asking this as someone who lost their husband to ALS, so I know the hurt and the pain that you go through, seeing your husband go through it.
Yeah. I think the hardest moments, and you definitely see some of these in the film, were when it felt like he was taxing his voice so much. I think in some ways the physical strain was a little bit less, although, he would get, sore and that sort of thing. But there were definitely moments where it was this sort of like what's he trading off, because as we know, with ALS, it's like you don't get things back, right? Like when things decline, unfortunately, that's usually the new level that you're at. And so there were these moments where it really felt like he's spending this amount of voice that he has, right? And that was tough. But I do think it really felt like Nick was saying, that being able to do this and to give these big speeches, um, really did give a lot of meaning to what had seemed like this random tragic event, just sort of coming out of nowhere, right when things had seemed so perfect, right when we had a 4-month-old baby, we had just moved to California, and just everything seemed like it had sort of worked out. And so I think being able to find some meaning in that was really valuable for Audie. And so it was kind of not that it was easy, but we didn't in a way actually really like debate a lot, like, should you do this or not? It was like, well, this is what we're trading for it, but it seems like it's really meaningful. So, yeah, that was kind of the decision-making process. I think also, when you're in it and every little step is so small in ALS, and it's such a strange progression, that it's so different for every person, that it can also be kind of hard to see those little steps along the way. Then you do really notice them when you're looking back. But early on when his voice was getting a little scratchy, it's like I hardly even noticed it, right? You notice it later on comparing.
It's funny because I was going to ask very similar type of question that Melissa asked, because Melissa and I both lost our husbands to ALS, and now we work at TDI. Um, I I can't even imagine packing my husband up into an RV with a bunch of his either friends or colleagues or whomever's, and watching it drive away. Like I can't. I mean, I barely went to the grocery store because I was worried that nobody could take care of him. How did you say bye? Good luck. I mean, literally the moment that I was watching, I was like, oh, man, she is a stronger woman than I am, because that was just unbelievable. That must have been the hardest thing to do.
Well, I think it's a couple things. So I don't know if Nick wants me to
Yeah,
respond,
no,
but
it's fine. Yeah.
the way the
Go for
film
it.
was cut made it so I was actually on more of the RV trip than it looks like I was in the
Ah,
movie.
got
Um,
it.
because Carl was so little, I would sort of be there for like 10 days, and then we'd go home and then meet up again. So there were big portions of it that I didn't go to. And now I'm kind of like, again, it's the thing that it's like in the moment, you're like, this makes sense. But there are parts that I'm like, oh, I wish I had been there. Um, but so that was part of it that I didn't actually really. So that's also why in the movie I'm like, okay, bye, because like actually I was seeing him the next day.
I think in this I'll leave it to you to answer, but for us, first of all, you have to take various narrative liberties
Yeah.
with this kind of storytelling. I mean, I'll give
Totally.
you, by way of example, when Audie loses his voice on stage, that happened many times, but we needed to use elements. And I think for me, the higher truth, I think, was that they did spend a significant amount of time apart. I think, Glynis, even an amount of time apart that you would have found very hard at the time. So we tried to, you know, try to heighten some of that drama to show what the stakes were for that. So I want to let Rachel off the hook there. There is one, we have gotten that comment, I think, on our IMDb page where somebody said, how could he possibly leave?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll leave it to you to answer that, but just, defending my journalistic bona fides of why we chose to show it that way.
Yeah, no, and there was definitely like there was a later it was very hard, I think, for Nick to make it seem like it made sense, like the timeline, because given the fact that we were like a little bit back and forth. Um, but so anyway, that and yeah, we were apart for probably like 2 or 3 weeks on the trip. Um, so that was part of it. But I think the other part, which is like a lot more meaningful to me, is that even though that was before we had full-time paid caregivers, I think that very early on, and like Nick and the documentary team became a part of this, but like also like all of Audie's wonderful colleagues who were on that trip with him, I think we moved very early on into this very communal way of taking care of Audie that was really beautiful and powerful. And like I've tried to think of ways that to like keep that going, despite the fact that Audie's not here anymore. But I really trusted particularly Nate, of course, his best friend, but a lot of other people to be there for Audie and to take care of him. And and I was with Carl and he was so little that it was like I had to do so much of the childcare that I really had to kind of let other people be really involved with caring for Audie. But in the end, that was one of the best things about him having ALS, was just thinking about like these other ways to kind of organize taking care of each other and, allowing that to extend beyond our individual family. And I think so many people don't have that option for a variety of reasons. And it's really, I mean, I still struggled a lot with caregiving, and caregiving is a really, really difficult role. But I think that, so many people feel very isolated as caregivers. And that was mostly not my experience, which was really wonderful. So I think, when I look at that and I see these, most of his colleagues, even Adi, not, he knew them, but he wasn't super close to them at the start. And like, these are people who are just incredible friends and parts of my life now. And so that has been really wonderful.
I mean, it really makes me think, doesn't it, Sunny and Glynis of From the Passenger Seat?
Mhm.
Have you guys seen that, Rachel and Nick?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Oh,
That is a film that we did last year, Sunny, right? Yeah, we'll put the link in the chat for you. But talking about communal caretaking and friends stepping up and having the ability to take care of someone as a gift and a bonding experience is real. Thanks, Emily. Super good story. You'll enjoy it.
yeah.
Yeah, check it out.
And I want to read Juan's comment. Juan says, it's a gift to the world, giving time that could have been reserved for family. Extremely unselfish, and thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope you know this, Rachel, and hear it with your kids when they're old enough that you know, like during the debates, we were all screaming if we were able to scream. Otherwise, we are doing the silent ALS version of a scream and texting each other and saying, "Did you just see that?" I mean, we lived vicariously, and he brought life and pride to everybody as, he brought his issues and the disease and all of the people living with it to center stage. It was just effing awesome.
It was, yeah. And he got a lot out of it too. So it was a gift and unselfish, but it was good
He's
for him.
rich and famous.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I think it was really important in the film with, moments like that and his humor to show that he was a real person and to not, one thing I was very conscientious of, I told Audie about this, but I had several members of my family who were in the disability rights movement. My aunt has cerebral palsy. My grandfather was blind and from India and worked on started a nonprofit for the blind in India. And my aunt had told me about a lot of really horrible experiences she had with media growing up, including like being brought onto a telethon as a fundraiser. This is like back in the 1960s. That was really humiliating for her. And she kind of told me when I started talking to, Audie about this project, like, don't do that. And I think one of the ways that we wanted to approach it was not, it's part of the reason we include the scene about people calling him inspirational and him sort of undercutting that idea, because that trope, I think, can be, at least from Audie's perspective, maybe, or from others, or from Jake, who's in that scene with him, can be somewhat harmful. And I think the way that he is inspirational is by showing that actually anybody can do this, that he really was a regular and often very crass human being. And so that was really important to me to try to show that even though everywhere you would turn, he was getting called a hero, that he was actually, that anyone can be a hero, as he would say. So that was part of why we tried to infuse the film with a lot of humor and regular moments that weren't just him being celebrated on stage by Elizabeth Warren or whoever.
Yeah, we still loved it though.
I was
Hi.
going to ask what it was like to get a call that he'd been arrested, but it sounds like that happened more than once.
Yeah. Yeah, I think actually the first time he got arrested, I think that we were both in the Capitol together, or I can't remember if we were in the Capitol or in the Senate building. I think in one of the office buildings. Um, and so it was very emotional because we were all there together, and then the way that the Capitol Police, they're so used to arresting protesters, right? And so they're sort of like, okay, if you want to get arrested, stay over here. If you don't want to get arrested, go over there. And so, like, again, I was with Carl, and so I was like, okay, I'm not going to get arrested. So, we sort of went to the other end of the hall. But yeah, it was really emotional because, even though it's sort of like he's choosing to get arrested, it's still, he's they had a problem of even like handcuffing him, right? Because he was using a walking stick at that time, and he would have fallen over if they had tried to handcuff him and make him walk without his walking stick. And so I think what they did was they just sort of like put a handcuff on one hand, sort of like symbolically, I guess, and let him walk like that. But again, going to this idea of like that um, sort of sending him off is like, yeah, I can't be there with him and make sure that people are taking care of him, obviously, when he's getting arrested. And in that scenario, like it was fine. There were other people being arrested alongside him. But it is very emotional, just to sort of see him like moving into the scenario where like he doesn't have a lot of control over the situation, obviously, because he's, just made that decision. But yeah, no, I don't think that there was a time when it was sort of like, oh, I got a phone call and he had been arrested. I think we were pretty much like in the same spaces usually when that happened.
Hey, Rachel, I had, well, first a comment and to you too, Nick. Just thank you for being here. I know you both are so fresh in your grief and I just appreciate you being able to put like four words together. Um, but I was just kind of wondering, I mean, it might sound like a weird question, but so how will you move forward using this film in a way to like maybe to create more of a legacy for Addie or a way to use this film to inspire other people? Is there any kind of a plan for that? Or because I mean, it's amazing. I mean, it truly is an amazing film.
Well, Adi's organization, Be a Hero, still exists. And it was already in a structure where he had a co-director, Jamila Headley. And so, she's still the director of the organization. And so, I think that they're figuring out what things look like moving forward, right, without Adi there. But definitely, they are hoping to continue working on the issues that he was working on. And I'm sure that, the film will be part of that. Nick was talking about the kind of different times it had been screened. Like it's definitely been screened um, in these political settings. And then even like the day before the memorial here in Santa Barbara, there was a screening of the film. And I know that there were other screenings in New York and DC at the same time. Um, so yeah, so I think I'm gonna be probably getting more involved with Be a Hero than I had been before. Um, in my own work, I'm working on a book that's about care and kind of communal caregiving, that's sort of blending memoir and history and sociology, kind of like looking at different ways to organize care. So that's sort of like how I'm thinking about it. Because I'm an English professor, I'm a writer, so that's how I tend to approach things is like, well, what could I write about this? So I think that those are kind of the two ways that I'm thinking about right now. Like, how does the work that Adi was doing that I've been doing with him continue moving forward?
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. And I have been thinking about that a lot as well. It was, really uh, important. It was really moving when we were able to celebrate him together in January in Santa Barbara with a lot of members of Congress came to that. And I had some informal conversations with them about doing more with the film, which we'd really like to do as well. I don't think this is final, but I haven't mentioned this to you, Rachel, but I heard from the Obama Museum opening in Chicago that they would like to put clips of the film into their permanent installation. So talking with them about that, and hopefully something will come of that. And I think the last piece of screenings like this, which we hope will continue. And if there are folks here and other organizations and that want to host screenings of the film, that's something we'll continue to do. There are other people in the film like Tracy and Liz and other organizers who participated in these kinds of screenings. We did a couple of bird dog trainings with Tracy at one time where she taught some of those tools. So, and just in all my personal life and storytelling, I think a little bit about, what would Adi do in pretty much every big decision in my life now. And so, both personally and through this film, I, hope that we can carry his torch on together.
I have to say, I loved the bird dogging scene where you guys are teaching everyone. I was like, oh, I want to go to that. That looked amazing.
Talk to Tracy and Julia Peter at the Bird Dog Nation, and they'll host one. I think,
I love it.
yeah.
What is Liz doing right now?
Liz just had her second baby.
Oh,
So she's in family mode, but I think maybe you know, Rachel, more about her longer term plans, but she continues to consult for progressive campaigns and causes, and supporting other candidates, which is what she was doing before meeting Adi, which is why it was so amazing they were in that airport together, which is that she had just kind of had this she was trying to make a viral video with a progressive candidate, I guess, in the election at that time. And she was on the phone in the airport terminal saying, like, why won't this video go viral? And then Adi, who'd never met her, turned around and this is all in Adi's book. It's before the movie started, which you should all check out. Said, oh, I went viral in a video recently. And it wasn't that viral because it was previous to encountering Jeff Flake. They walk onto the plane together. Jeff Flake's there and basically say to each other, want to make a viral video right now? And that's how it happens. So Liz has an amazing story and also comes from a family of activists. She's South African, and her family was involved in the anti-apartheid movement. And yeah, I think she will also, like the rest of us, be doing big things in the future that commemorate Adi's life. But she deserves her own movie. One of the hardest cuts was a lot of the amazing things that she said and did that didn't quite fit, but we'll have to save for the special edition.
That was going to be my question. What are there things that didn't make the film that you wish you had time?
Yeah, it was really the stories of the other people. I mean, to some degree, that includes Rachel. Rachel, as she said, was on the tour a lot more, and is did a lot of the activism and organizing and participated in the ads and protests, and that kind of applies to everybody. Like Nate, who Rachel was talking about earlier, who's Adi's best friend, is an amazing person and has a long friendship with Adi, and amazing old photos of them from when they were kids together. And we used to have a whole sequence about their friendship and their high school days that ultimately didn't make the cut. Anna Maria Archila, who later on confronts Jeff Flake again and is an incredible organizer and activist herself, is another fits into that deserving of their own movie category. Anna Maria recently ran for office in New York, and I think will do so again. And so it was really tough to squeeze her into the film, to have to cut out those pieces. But we ultimately realized that we wanted to tell the story from Adi's perspective, and as much airtime as other people needed to have. And even that includes Rachel. I think, a lot of people see the film and frankly say, Rachel, as you guys are asking, we want to know more about how, Rachel, you were feeling. And that was a balance that we had to strike because we, knew it was ultimately Adi's story. But, the people around him were amazing. And what we wanted to do, including the caregivers, what we wanted to do is give the feeling that this was a movement, a community, while also making sure the story stayed grounded in Adi's reality. So that's that. And, also just a lot of other, kind of bad jokes from Adi that were, I see a question here. Yes, so we can make the film available. Sorry, I'm answering Lynn's question. I got distracted by a comment here. And Lynn, we can make the film available to libraries and institutions. I'll just put my email in here, which is the easiest way to do it. If you want to just drop me a note, and we can have, individuals can download the film, and then institutions can buy a license for libraries and colleges and all that kind of thing. So we'd love to facilitate that.
We also have a couple notes in the chat. They're not questions exactly, but I'm just going to read them for folks. So Juan wrote, regardless of one's age, a big brother figure, one vicariously adopted by all. Brandy said, passion equals great power. He used his for the good of all. And Kate said, my friend is a special ed teacher for high school kids, and she screamed this to inspire future political advocates here in Boston.
Oh, hey, Kate.
I have a question.
I got to know before Michelle. I gotta ask this question.
Go for it, Cindy.
Is Charlie's hair still that curly? And did Willow get it?
It is, yeah, it is still curly. I thought that it would get straight, but no, he has very curly hair. It's great. Although he gets annoyed with people commenting on it all the time. No, Willow's hair is not, it's pretty straight now, actually. It was like a little curlier when she was younger, but she had her first like big haircut recently. She wanted to cut off all her hair. And yeah, it's pretty straight now. So they have, yeah, they have different hair. But yeah.
I loved his big personality.
Yes. That he also still has.
Kim, Michelle, I'll share.
I was just wondering, did Adi know how much he helped the community with ALS specifically, especially when it comes to Medicare and caregiving benefits? Like, did he understand how much he helped all of us?
I mean, I hope so. I think that he, I think he was really motivated by the ALS community, of course. And I think, he obviously there's some groups and organizations, like Steve Gleason's or Brian Wallach's that focus specifically on ALS. And I think that he was, very motivated by that, but also wanted to think about the ways that he could use, his diagnosis to actually, think about the healthcare system overall. But, of course, he was so focused on the home care issue, which is so acute for people with ALS. And I think that was something that was really important to him, and it's something that's really important to me. So yeah, I mean, I hope he knew that even as he was working on these kind of larger healthcare issues.
Did you see get caregivers help, like, work caregivers more um available to you from what Addie had accomplished? Like, was any of the help you received in home better?
So we were in this very strange and, in our under the circumstances, lucky situation that when Adi was first diagnosed, his doctor put in a request for a piece of equipment that was denied. And Adi sued our health insurance company. And the settlement they offered eventually was to reimburse the cost of his home care. So we had covered paid home care, which is almost unheard of, right? Like most people do not have any access to that. Um, and so that made a huge difference in our lives. We were able to hire caregivers directly rather than using an agency. And so most of the caregivers we had, were just sort of like word of mouth through other caregivers. And so we were also able to set our own hourly rates and to offer paid sick leave, paid vacation. So most of the caregivers not most. We certainly like had a lot of turnover still because I think there's always a lot of turnover in those jobs, but we had several caregivers who were with Audi for 5 or 6 years. So we had a lot of stability. Um, we're still seeing them right now. In fact, one of them, Isamar, who's in the film, is currently picking up the kids and bringing them home for dinner. So we still see her about once a week. We see Robert about once a week. So basically, because we were able to get this benefit, which is unavailable to most people, it just really impacted our quality of life. And so again, I think that's why that was something that was so important to Adi, was seeing like this is something that makes ALS a long-term livable condition, right? Is to have this high quality 24-hour home care. And most people just don't have access to that. And it's, it's outrageous that people don't have that.
Lots of nodding heads.
Yeah.
Everybody understands that from different perspectives, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, it's frustrating to me because when I'll talk about our caregivers, people will often ask, like, how did you get that covered? How can I get my health insurance company to do that? And it's like, it was this bizarre fluke that they denied something they shouldn't have. And that's how we forced them to do it. And it's, it's very frustrating that that's not really replicable. I guess you could try to get it to happen somehow, but for the most part, it's not like a strategy. It was just a weird thing that happened to us. And the strategy
To see someone.
yeah, right. The strategy is, getting all these people off Medicaid waiting lists, and making, having an actual social safety net that would provide this for people.
Do you have any other questions from the audience that people want to type in or unmute themselves and ask?
Doesn't look like it. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for not just joining us today, but letting us into your lives, letting us see your work and your family, and just inspiring us all to be more engaged and educated. I know I learned a whole lot about things that I probably have been taught in my life that didn't make sense until I watched them in play in the movie. So just thank you. Thank you for being there, and thank you for continuing to be here.
First, thank you so much for having us.
That was really fun. Thank you, you guys.
Thank you all.
Thanks for making this film.
Thank you for the work that you're doing, and I hope it can contribute in some way. And I put my email in the chat if anybody wants to screen the film with their local organizations. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Sunny.
Yeah.